Yep. So it's a hello to you, and that's a photograph taken at one of the gatherings we had in Scotland last year. About 70 people turned up, and I'll talk a little bit about some of that because the DEEP network is a UK network. We don't get any funding from local authorities or health boards or government at all. So it truly is a UK network, although we're aware of some of the national and more local boundaries that occur. And it's funny, isn't it, the smaller the communities, the harder the boundaries can be. I live in a very, very rural part of Scotland, and one town doesn't talk to another, etc. So it can be difficult. So local groups are really, really important sometimes because people don't always want to travel. DEEP, the UK network, is part of Innovations in Dementia. DEEP is not an organisation. Innovations in Dementia is. And DEEP is a network created by Innovations in Dementia. Innovations in Dementia is an enormous community interest company comprising 4 people who are our directors: Steve Milton, Rachel Litherland, Philly Hare and Damien Murphy. Some of those names might be familiar to some of you and some might not. And we often work in partnership with them to deliver pieces of work or do bits of research with people living with dementia. We're funded by, I'm standing in the way, so we're funded by Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Comic Relief and Life Changes Trust, who are in Scotland, but uniquely for the projects that Life Changes Trust, who have a very tight geographical boundary to their work, because they're Scottish. I'm nearly Scottish, I've lived there for nearly 40 years. Life Changes Trust put their money into the UK pot. So that means that what happens in the north of Scotland can communicate with something that's happening in the southeast or the southwest of England. Okay? So as I say, we're a UK network and it's about connecting people that live with dementia. Okay? DEEP is about groups that are led by and help to express the voice of the experience of living with dementia. Doesn't mean that carers and professionals aren't involved in those groups, but the purpose of people who are with people living with dementia is to make sure that the voice of the person living with dementia is heard. So it's not exclusive in that way, but that's the purpose. Would you agree, Joyce?
Yes.
Yep. Jane?
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. We've now almost 100 groups. It varies. We have discussions. Is it 80? Is it 110 or whatever? But there's 5 new groups in Scotland wanting to sign up this week, for example. And so I say about 100 groups, and I think we're around there. A year and a half ago, or nearly 2 years now, I suppose, isn't it, when Rachel and I started on DEEP 3, which we are DEEP 3, if you like. The money came to employ some coordinators. There were 42 groups in the UK. There were 2 in Scotland. We now have over 20 in Scotland, for example. Rachel's done fantastic coordination and development work with a lot of the people around the table in developing groups in Wales. Yeah, with lots of groups in Liverpool, projects in Manchester. Missing places are the very north of England, Cumbria, Northumberland. Yeah.
And the east as well.
And the east. Yeah, sure, Lincolnshire, East Anglia, those areas. Yeah. So we would say that DEEP is the independent voice of experience as a network. Obviously, other people have an independent voice of experience, but we're able to coordinate and link that network and link people together. Sorry, am I standing in that? Okay. The role, the criteria, if you like, for being a DEEP group is that you're formed from the voice of experience of living with dementia, wherever people live in whatever circumstances, whether it's in a care home, whether it's in a hospital ward, whether it's in the community, etc. And that the purpose of the group is to influence and improve attitudes, research and communities, etc. and the experience of living with dementia, and to dignify the experience of living with dementia. Things that I've picked up in my year and a bit are being positive. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that the laughter that came when we were introducing ourselves was from this table, and the jokes and the humour, and I think that's a fantastic carrier. It's something that is inspiring, and it relieves tension, and it helps us to live well with dementia. Creating hopefulness is a theme that comes through when I'm around. Human rights is a really big thing that's come through the DEEP network in my experience. The idea of recovery. Talk a little bit more about that. Recovery of self, recovery of purpose, recovery of meaning, etc. Not necessarily a recovery from dementia, but recovery of a sense of self-esteem, recovery of dignity. Very important themes that are coming through. We held a meeting to plan some gatherings in Scotland, and one lady came and she said she was in her 80s, lived in the care environment, said she'd never been to a planning meeting before, but somebody brought her along, thought she might be interested, and she didn't say anything for about 2 hours. And at the end, we were trying to find out what kind of, we call them gatherings in Scotland, meetups, get-togethers, whatever we call them gatherings. What kind of meeting would she like? And her opinion, after listening to us all talk, was that things should just be clear and tidy so you can find your way around. And if everyone's kind to each other, it'll work out. And that stayed in my mind because that says so much. We've suggested to the Scottish Government that they replace their dementia strategy with that sentence. And I'm not joking. Yeah. Otherwise it reads too much like a business plan for the major care providers. Are being ushered on. As people were set out, there's some quotes here from the DEEP network. It's important to get the correct diagnosis, somebody said. Dementia's not enough. There are many kinds of dementia which can benefit from different medications and treatments. They wouldn't just say to you, you got cancer, go away, we'll see you in 6 months. But that's an experience that a lot of people have had with dementia. So we have the right to more specific information. And that's, for me, one of the first quotes that people started to talk about the right that people have. Interesting concepts there. I don't know, 5 pillars, the 8-pillar model, and somebody was talked about trying to cross that bridge of self-management in between, but there was nothing there, so they fell in the river, and now they're learning to swim themselves, and they're campaigning for a self-directed support toolkit, without which people feel they're still being done to, rather than being in control of their own lives. And again, that's from the Scottish concept, that that's something that starts to drive the rights agenda. Okay. Sorry. A little bit of a note about the Scottish gatherings that we had. We've got money to do them again next year. Had one in the south of Scotland, one in the north of Scotland. Some things that groups do then. So in Scotland we've developed a Scottish networking movement, if you like. That there are lots of groups, but at least 3 times a year everybody gets together. Yep. And we don't have an agenda. We create the context for people to talk and raise their priorities. Some things people have said: I want to see a world which accepts dementia. Living with dementia is a journey. You can find new ways to use your brain and learn to outmaneuver dementia. This person talked about not used to driving down a straight road, but suddenly roundabouts and bypasses have started to appear in the road. So he's got to learn how to drive around those roundabouts. That's part of the positive attitude that can come from a deep group, where people share their new skills. Another interesting comment: dementia's mainly about loneliness, the negative side of dementia, but you can find community in all sorts of places, not just in dementia services, which stresses the importance of, if we have dementia, we're part of our community. We're not outside the community. Wind me up if you think I'm going too slowly. Yeah. Bottom one there. 2 minutes, right, okay, no chance. Join us in our journey of hopefulness. When I told my doctor of all the positive things I was doing, this is a quote from Maria, he said, "Maria, you must understand you are not going to get better." Why did he have to say that, said Maria. And she gave that talk in front of about 150 medical and mental health professionals, who then, we heard them over coffee, all talking about hopefulness. Hopefulness is a really interesting concept. So one person can make an enormous difference. Somebody in this room said once, DEEP doesn't try to tell us about dementia. DEEP listens to what we have to say, and that's maybe an important difference. Listen to the quiet voices. Making a difference. How does DEEP make a difference? We've established a number of working projects about our right to get out and about, which seems to be a priority that evolves from discussing the experience of dementia with people. We don't actually talk about dementia very much in DEEP groups. We talk about how life can be made better, but we don't have detailed discussions about dementia, do we? What it's like to live with it and how things can be made better. Sensory challenges has led to a number of projects. The idea of recovery, neuroplasticity, social health, human rights and dignity, culture and diversity, working with universities in Liverpool and the west of England, exploring the experience of living with dementia in a minority culture, Chinese community, for example. Complex challenges, which is the way we started to say it in certain parts, rather than talking about advanced dementia. Instead of saying working with people with advanced dementia, a number of groups have turned that around and said the challenges are what are the challenges that we have in helping people with dementia? What are those complex challenges? So instead of putting the onus on the person with dementia, who's complex, the challenge is to the service to work with that person throughout life. Using creative and cultural opportunities, lots of examples across the UK in DEEP groups where the creative and cultural capacities of people are used to enhance experience, not delivering high-tech creative opportunities for people, but building on the experience of people. In the Western Islands, people are now working, the group up there is working with hand memory and weaving practices, old folk song, and people that haven't spoken for a decade or more are starting to communicate. Fantastic work. So this is just a sample. Working with sustainable and transformational, that should be now, partnerships, the STPs in Yorkshire. DEEP guides that we produce. Thank you, Rachel, for bringing this. There's a whole folder full of the DEEP guides that are all on the website. There's a leaflet on your table there that you can get onto. And people from DEEP groups help us to write DEEP guides in different publications. Dementia Rights, which actually brings together all the different rights that people have depending where you live in the UK. Are we aware that there are different mental health and capacity laws in Scotland, for example, from England, and there's very little interchange between national governments and local governments, legal professions, police, social work departments, etc. There's not a high level of awareness, so that's another publication that we put together. Networking meetings and gatherings and influencing strategies, practice, research and policy, whether that's very, very local or whether it's with the World Health Organization or the United Nations. You have to drag me off this stage here. I won't, what will I say? Our right to lead, tell us on the train when I did this. Our right to lead research, not just to be research subjects, I think is really important, and we now have 3 projects going on where that research project is being led by people with dementia, supported by a university, rather than the university asking for participants to actually fill out a theoretical scheme or research project, if you like. So it's turning it upside down in that way.